Hello, Dr. Wiecki. I'm Dominic Kibby, and this is my midterm for Weimar Republic and Nazi Germany. So, the first part of question one was, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Weimar Constitution? Some strengths I have are that it established a democratic system of government in Germany. The Weimar Constitution introduced preliminary democracy, giving citizens the right to vote and elect representatives to the Reichstag, the German parliament. This allowed for more inclusive and representative forms of governance. Another strength is it guaranteed fundamental rights and freedoms to the citizens. The Constitution included provisions safeguarding individual rights such as freedoms of speech, assembly, and religion, and it also ensured equality before the law, protecting citizens from discrimination. Another strength was it created a multi-party system. The Weimar Constitution allowed for the existence of multiple political parties, promoting a diverse range of voices and perspectives in the political landscape. The pluralistic approach aimed to foster a more inclusive and participatory democracy. Some of the weaknesses I put down was that it faced challenges from extremist groups such as the Nazi Party. The Weimar Republic struggled to combat the rise of extremist ideologies, most notably the Nazi Party. These groups exploited the weaknesses of the system and used propaganda to gain support, ultimately leading to the erosion of democracy. The second weakness I put down was that it lacked strong mechanisms to prevent the rise of authoritarianism. The Weimar Constitution did not have sufficient safeguards in place to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of a single leader. This allowed for the eventual ascent of Adolf Hitler and the establishment of a totalitarianism regime. The last weakness I put down was some critics argued that it gave too much power to the president. The Weimar Constitution granted significant authority to the president, including the ability to dissolve the Reichstag and appoint the chancellor. Critics argued that this concentration of power undermined the checks and balances necessary for a stable democracy. How did the Constitution contribute to the stability and the instability of the Weimar Republic? Some stability through the Weimar Constitution was the democratic government. The Constitution set up a parliamentary democracy. This meant that the government was elected by the people, which was a big step forward in terms of inclusivity and representation after the rule of Kaiser in Imperial Germany. Another thing is rights and freedoms. It included a catalog of rights, similar to the Bill of Rights, which protected civil liberties like freedom of speech and equality before the law. This was meant to ensure that all citizens felt their rights were respected. Political diversity. The multi-party system allowed for various political ideologies to be presented in the Reichstag, which is the German parliament. This was intended to make the government more representative of the population's diverse views. Separation of powers. The Constitution aimed to distribute power across different branches of the government to avoid the rise of another authoritarianism regime. This separation was crucial for maintaining a balance and preserving abuses of power. Some instability through the Weimar Constitution includes proportional representation, and while this system is very democratic, it often resulted in a large number of parties with seats in the Reichstag, which made it difficult to form stable majority governments. Coalitions were often shaky and could fall apart, leading to political instability and frequent elections. Presidential powers. The president had power to appoint and dismiss the chancellor, dissolving the Reichstag, and under Article 58 had emergency powers to rule by decree. These powers could be and were abused, undermining the parliamentary system. Extremist exploitation. The Nazis and other extremist parties were able to exploit the vulnerabilities of the Weimar Constitution, such as the use of Article 48 to gain power. The Constitution did not have strong enough safeguards to prevent anti-democratic forces from dismantling the democracy from within. What would you have changed to make the Constitution more likely to survive beyond 1933? Stronger checks on presidential power. I would limit the emergency powers of the president to prevent potential misuse. I believe by limiting the president's emergency powers, which allowed them to rule by decree under Article 48, we could prevent the kind of authoritarian takeover that happened with Hitler. Ensuring that any use of these powers is closely monitored and needs a clear, justified reason would help. Majority vote threshold. Implementing a minimum vote threshold for parties to enter the Reichstag to reduce fragmentation. If there was a rule that said this party needs to get a certain percentage of the vote to have seats in the Reichstag, it would prevent Parliament from having too many small parties, which made it hard to form stable governments. This would lead to fewer, stronger parties and more stable coalitions. Clearer process for amending the Constitution. I would establish a more rigorous process for constitutional amendments and protect democratic principles. The Constitution could have included a more detailed and challenging process to change its core democratic principles. This would protect against quick and drastic changes that could undermine democracy. Strengthen political parties. Encourage a stable and moderate party alliances to prevent extremist influence. Encouraging the development of a strong, moderate parties could help to create a more stable political landscape. This could involve setting standards for party leadership and promoting policies that encourage parties to work together. Education on democracy. Invest in civic education to bolster public commitment to democratic values. By investing in education that promotes democratic values and informs citizens about the importance of democracy, the public will be more likely to support and protect their government. It's harder for extremist views to take hold when the population understands and values their political system. I believe that these changes would have helped the Weimar Constitution to be more resilient and possibly withstand more of the challenges that it faced. Describe the political system of the Weimar Republic and what the agendas of the different political parties were. So the semi-presidential system was the Weimar Republic blended features of a parliamentary system and with a presidential system. The president was elected by the people for a 7-year term and held significant powers, such as appointing the chancellor, who needed the confidence of the Reichstag to govern. The president could also dissolve the Reichstag and call new elections, and had emergency powers under Article 48. Proportional representation. This system was intended to provide a fair representation of political parties in the Reichstag. Parties received seats in proportion to the number of votes they got, which meant that even small parties could gain entry into the parliament and have influence. Multiple parties with various agendas. The SPD, which stands for Social Democratic Party of Germany, was the party of the working class and the largest party during much of the Weimar period. It advocated for social justice, workers' rights, and a welfare state, and supported the democratic institutions of the Weimar Republic. The Zentrum. This party primarily represented the interests of Germany's Catholic population. It supported the democratic framework of the Weimar Republic and promoted social welfare policies. The DVP, Germany's People Party. The DVP was a political party that focused on economic issues. It supported business interests and aimed to restore Germany's pre-war economic strength, and generally took a more conservative stance on social issues. The KPD, which was the Communist Party of Germany, saw a revolution to establish a communist state. It was staunchly opposed to the Weimar Republic, which it saw as a capitalist state. The NSDAP, or the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or better known as the Nazi Party, was a far-right party led by Adolf Hitler. The NSDAP's platform included a fervent nationalism, the unification of all German-speaking peoples, Lebensraum, which is an expansion for living space, and anti-Semitism. They rejected the Treaty of Versailles and were opposed to the communism and democracy, which they sought to replace with the totalitarian state. Given the divisions within German society and between the different parties, was there a chance for Weimar democracy to not just survive, but to recover and prosper after 1929? Explain why or why not. No, I do not think that there was a chance for Weimar democracy to not just survive, but to recover and prosper after 1929 because of many factors, some of which include the global economic crisis, When the Great Depression struck, it set financial shockwaves across the world. Germany, still struggling with the reparations of World War I, saw its economy collapse. Unemployment soared, and the people struggled to meet basic needs. This economic despair eroded faith in the Weimar government's ability to provide for its citizens and maintain stability. Political polarization. The Weimar Republic was characterized by a multitude of political parties with vastly different ideologies, from communists to monarchists. This diversity made it difficult to form stable coalitions in the Reichstag, leading to frequent changes in governments and policies. It also meant that compromises were hard to reach, resulting in the lack of consistent governance. Another one is the rise of extremism. The economic and political instability of the time created fertile ground for extremist groups. The Nazis, led by Adolf Hitler, and the Communists both gained substantial followings by promising radical solutions to Germany's problems. These groups did not support the democratic system and were prepared to use violence to achieve their ends, further destabilizing the country. Weak democratic tradition. Prior to the Weimar Republic, Germany had been ruled by monarchs. This meant that the democracy was a relatively new and unsteady system for Germans, who lacked a strong tradition of the democratic governance. As a result, many citizens and elites were skeptical or even hostile towards the Weimar Republic, and some wanted to return to a more authoritarian form of government. Over-reliance on presidential powers. The Weimar Constitution allowed the president to rule by decree in emergency situations under Article 48. This provision was meant to be used sparingly, but became a tool for bypassing the democratic process. It set a dangerous precedent and was exploited by President Hindenburg and later by Hitler to consolidate power. And lastly, the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, imposed heavy reparations on Germany and restricted its military. Many Germans viewed the treaty as a national humiliation. This resentment was a powerful tool for extremist parties who blamed the Weimar government for accepting the treaty and promised to overturn it. For question number 2, in favor of the Weimar Republic's potential success, Streseman's diplomacy improved the foreign relations, and the Dawas Plan helped economic recovery between 1925 to 1929. Hindenburg's election seemed to stabilize the political landscape initially. But for some of the cons, the Russian Revolution scared many Germans, fearing communism. Germany's defeat in the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles fueled national resentment. The early years were marked by economic turmoil and political assassinations, and the rear occupation by France and Belgium worsened the economy. Then the Wall Street crash in 1929 kicked off more instability. Ludendorff's backing of Hitler gave the Nazis military credibility, and Hindenburg's later decisions like appointing Hitler as chancellor undermined democracy. Culturally, there was a lot of flux and uncertainty, which extremists exploited. Gustav Stresemann was key in renegotiating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which many Germans found humiliating. His work led to the Dawas Plan, which reinstructed reparations and stabilized the economy. The Locarno treaties he helped renegotiate eased tensions with the neighboring countries, leading to Germany's admission to the League of Nations in 1926. The Dawas Plan helped reduce the burden of reparations by spreading the payments over a more extended period and providing loans to Germany. This stimulated economic growth, leading to a period known as the Golden Twenties, which there was a cultural and scientific flourishing alongside the economic upturn. As a respected military leader, Hindenburg's presidency added a sense of stability and continuity to the Weimar government. His support for democratic process and his appointment of capable chancellors helped maintain confidence in the government. The fear of communist uprising in Germany was very real after the Russian Revolution. This fear drove many conservative Germans towards right-wing parties like the Nazis, who promised to crush communism and restore national pride. The defeat in World War II, subsequent and the subsequent Versailles Treaty had a lasting impact on the German psyche. The loss of territory, military restrictions, and the burden of reparations caused widespread resentment, which extremist parties like the Nazis exploited by promising to overturn the treaty and restore Germany's former glory. When Germany failed to make reparations payments, French and Belgian troops occupied the industrial Ruhr region in 1929, leading to passive resistance and further economic turmoil. The resulting hyperinflation destroyed life savings and caused a great deal of instability in society, which added to the public's frustration with the Weimar Republic. Question number 3. What was the experience of German Jews in the Weimar Republic like, and how did it differ from the time before World War I? Before World War I, many German Jews considered themselves German first and Jews second, indicating that they were integrated fairly easily into the German society. They were influential in industries, finance, law, the arts, and other professions, and they made contributions to Germany's economy and culture. Anti-Semitic attitudes existed, but were generally countered by the legal equality Jews had achieved in the 19th century. During the Weimar Republic, the Weimar Constitution granted equal rights to all citizens, including Jews, which was a continuation of the legal status they had before the war. There was a significant presence of Jews in the Weimar cultural scene, contributing to the arts, film, and literature. Jewish scholars and scientists, such as Albert Einstein, gained international recognition during this period. Despite legal equality, economic turmoil and societal changes led to increased scapegoating and anti-Semitism, with radical political factions promoting Jewish conspiracy theories. The late Weimar period saw a rise in anti-Semitic violence and propaganda, especially from the Nazi Party, which would have catastrophic consequences in the following years. The Weimar era was a time of complex social dynamics for German Jews, marked by both cultural achievements and growing hostility. How did the German Jews contribute to the Weimar culture and society, and what trends threatened the Jewish life in the Republic? Some contributions are culture. Jewish artists like Max Liebermann and writers like Franz Kafka contributed to the vibrant cultural scene. The Bauhaus movement, with figures like Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, had Jewish representation that influenced architecture and design. The intellectual sphere. Thinkers such as Albert Einstein in physics and Walter Benjamin in literature and philosophy offered groundbreaking ideas that resonated worldwide. Economic impact. Jewish business leaders helped modernize many sectors, including retail, banking, and the film industry, with famous names like the UFA Film Studio. Social progress. Active in social reform, Jewish feminists like Helene Stocker campaigned for reproductive sexual rights, while others contributed to welfare programs and children's rights. Some threats were political anti-Semitism. Parties like the Nazis used propaganda to stoke fear and hatred, falsely accusing of Jews being un-German or disloyal. Economic scapegoating. During economic downturns, Jews were often blamed for hyperinflation and unemployment, despite their actual contributions to the economy. Cultural backlash. As Jewish individuals became more prominent in the arts and academics, a backlash grew among conservative and nationalists who resented their influence. Violence and persecution. As the Nazis gained power, they began to enact laws that stripped Jews of their rights, leading to violence, boycotts of Jewish businesses, and ultimately, the Holocaust. The Weimar era was a time of great cultural flourishing for the Jewish Germans, but also a period where ominous threats arose, which would tragically conclude in the events of World War II. Jewish embrace of secularism and social integration. German Jews who embraced secularism often excelled in secular careers and academics, becoming integral to German intellectual and cultural life. They contributed to a modern German identity, often serving in the military and showing patriotism, while they believed would combat anti-Semitism. Their participation in society was based on the belief in the Enlightenment values of rationalism, progress, and universal rights, which were thought to protect them legally and socially. The Zionist approach to leaving Germany. Zionists argued that Jews would always be the outsiders in European societies and needed their own nation for true safety and self-determination. Those who heeded the Zionists' call to immigrate to Palestine before the rise of Nazis avoided the horrors of the Holocaust. The establishment of Israel in 1948 validated the Zionist perspective, providing a homeland for Jews worldwide, especially survivors of the Holocaust. And the last part of question number 3, how did most German Jews regard Hitler's rise to power, and why did so few of them leave in the early 1930s? Disbelief in Hitler's longevity. Many German Jews could not fathom that Hitler and the Nazis would last long in power. They saw his ideas as too radical and believed that the strong democratic traditions of the Weimar Republic would prevail. German Jews had a long history in Germany, with many feeling fully German and seeing no distinction between their Jewish heritage and their German nationality. This deep sense of belonging made the idea of leaving their home country seem like an overreaction. The Nazis introduced their anti-Semitic policies gradually. With each new law, many Jews rationalized that the situation could be managed and that these were just temporary setbacks. The hope was that reason would eventually win out. Victor Kempler, a Jewish professor, kept his detailed diaries that expressed his initial disbelief at the Nazis' staying power and his trust in German culture and institutions to resist the tide of anti-Semitism. Leaving Germany wasn't simple. It required money, visas, and a country willing to accept Jewish immigrants. Many Jews struggled to gather the necessary resources or were unable to find a destination willing to take them in. The Evian Conference, held in France in 1938, was a response to the growing refugee crisis as Jews sought to flee Germany. However, most countries, including the United States and Britain, were hesitant to accept large numbers of Jewish refugees, which sent disheartening messages to those looking to leave. These factors combined to create a situation where many German Jews stayed in Germany during the early 1930s, not out of ignorance, but due to a complex mix of emotional ties, economic realities, and international policies.